For almost 10 years, two names rarely appeared in the same headline, up until the 25th of August, 2026, when Dolly Parton died at age 80. A man in the Oval Office answered in a way that not many people thought would happen. Trump has tried for years to honor her. They stayed away from each other for years. What really happened between a president who wanted to give her the country's greatest civilian honor and a singer who wouldn't let politics get in the way of her name? Why should you read on? The real story behind their strange, respectful distance says more about them both than any article could ever say. When politics first came to Dolly's door, flags at half-staff have been around for a long time. Behind closed doors in Washington, D.C., there was a much quieter story going on. During Trump's first term, his administration tried twice to give the Presidential Medal of Freedom to Dolly Parton, the highest citizen award in the country. She said no twice. Parton talked about her reasons in an interview with NBC's. Her husband Carl Dean was sick at the time, so she couldn't take the first offer, as shown in Today. She turned down the second offer because she didn't want to travel while COVID-19 was going around. The tone wasn't meant to be political, not at first glance. A woman put her family and health ahead of an event in the nation's capital. A choice she explained in more depth in an interview that NPR later summed up. She said that both offers came straight from the Trump White House. What happened next was what made the story more interesting. When Joe Biden took office, his government also asked Parton to do the same thing. But she said no again. Once more, but this time for a very different reason. The woman told the Today Show that accepting the award under the new government might make it look like she was taking a side. The one thing she had spent her whole career trying to avoid was taking sides. No matter who asked her. A fact check that came out a few days after she died confirmed the whole story. Parton eventually turned down the medal 3 times, once from Biden and twice from Trump. She is one of the few famous people to have turned down the same honor from 2 different political administrations. Even Barack Obama weighed in during a 2020 appearance on The Late Show. He said that he thought it was wrong and that Parton should have gotten the award while he was president. He also joked that he would call Biden to talk about it. That admission from a past president made it seem even more like Dolly. Parton had become the one honor that every administration wanted to put on her, but she refused to accept it every time it was offered. Parton's fame had never rested on political connections or being close to the president, so the difference was striking. Her influence came from decades of music, charity work, songwriting, business ventures, and the fact that she could stay well-liked by many people without permanently joining one political party. It's also interesting to note how unusual she was among the people Trump was able to award the Presidential Medal of Freedom to during his first term. Some of the people who received them were retiring Utah Senator Orrin Hatch, former NFL player and Minnesota Supreme Court Justice Alan Page, and Elvis Presley himself after his death. Adding Presley makes the comparison even more interesting because, like Parton, he became much more than just a musician. He became a culture icon whose impact went far beyond the stage and recording studio. Parton's relationship with being recognized by the president stayed very different, though. Her reluctance wasn't exactly because she didn't want the honor. It was part of a larger pattern in which she seemed wary of political connections that could take away from the work she had spent her whole life doing. That difference was important. Parton had built an image that appealed to people of all ages, backgrounds, and political views. Her story could inspire fans with very different views. That legacy was already well established by the time Trump's name was linked to it in an important way. Her career had made it through decades of public scrutiny, changing musical styles, political scandals, and cultural shifts, without her having to become a public political figure. Music, kindness, and her own freedom had given her a strong base, not being close to power. That made the next phase even more important. When Trump tried to link his leadership to Parton, it became harder and harder for her to stay out of politics. It was one thing to refuse in private. It was a whole different thing when the question was asked in public, with cameras rolling and millions of people waiting for an answer. Parton had been very careful to stay out of presidential politics, but that was about to be the most obvious test of that. Trump could never get an answer to the interview, but turning down an award behind closed doors was easy. But doing it live on camera was a whole different story. In 2018, David Wright, an ABC News reporter, sat down with Dolly Parton and kept grilling her about Trump, a moment that was talked about years later in a bigger picture of her decades of avoiding politics. Wright even tried to connect the president to the character that Dolly Parton played in the 1980 movie 9 to 5, who was sexually abusive to her wife. She wouldn't bite the bait. Wright asked her to comment on that, but she refused. She also told him that she was not in politics, and that she had learned a long time ago to keep her mouth shut if she wanted to stay in show business. She made people laugh. Wright pointed out that she was also a role model, who had a real effect on culture. She readily agreed, stating that this was the reason she didn't want to talk about people in the first place. Wright wasn't being subtle with the comparison he was making. In 9 to 5, Parton's character had a boss named Franklin Hart. Hart was written to be sexist, controlling, and dishonest, so viewers were supposed to dislike him from the very first scene. A reporter was pretty direct when they asked Parton if the current president made her think of a role she played 40 years ago. They didn't just ask her to say his name in a negative sentence. He was still after an answer, but she wouldn't give it to him. That conversation pretty much set the tone for how she would answer any question about Trump for the rest of her career. 2 years later, she told USA Today that she didn't get involved in politics because she had about the same number of Republican and Democratic fans and didn't want to upset either group by picking a side in a fight that wasn't hers to handle. She also said that everyone in America had the right to free speech, but that meant being responsible for what you said and did with that right. She had the right line to sum it all up because of her family history. She used it for years whenever reporters pressed her too hard on where she really stood. She joked that since her father was a Republican and her mother was a Democrat, that made her a hypocrite. To make this point, she would purposely say the word incorrectly, so it sounded like hypocrite. People laughed almost every time they heard it, and it was also true in the most literal sense. The family was split down the middle long before Trump came up. In an interview with People magazine in 2021, she talked more about this attitude. She said that she knew that everything she said would be carefully heard and become something bigger than she had planned. She had to watch what she said because of this. To that, she added that she did have her own thoughts, but she wasn't usually one to voice them. She thought that faith and personal belief were meant to be used to help people, not to hurt them. It was a way of thinking that worked for Trump and anyone else who tried to get her to talk about something controversial. It stayed that way during Trump's first term, his time away from office, and his return to the White House. But she was put to the test in ways that showed how neutral she really was, especially when a global health crisis caused them to meet in a way that neither of them had planned. During Trump's first term, a quiet help. Parton and Trump were linked in more ways than just a conversation or an award show. When the coronavirus pandemic first started in April 2020, it was hard to tell what would happen. Parton gave $1 million to Vanderbilt University Medical Center to help pay for early study into a possible vaccine. A gift that was later said to have been very important in the creation of Moderna's COVID-19 vaccine. This gift is now known as the Dolly Parton COVID-19 Research Fund. It also directly helped Dr. Mark Dennison's work, as her addition to his lab at Vanderbilt helped them create the testing methods they needed to be sure the vaccine was causing a strong immune response. The Philanthropy Roundtable gave a detailed explanation of this process. Later, as part of the Trump administration's Operation Warp Speed program, the federal government gave Moderna about $1 billion of its own money to help with the vaccine effort. Parton's early donations and the president's signature pandemic initiative both ended up helping the same project. Even though they never said it that way in public, Parton never used the time to say nice things or bad things about the people in charge of that support. When asked later what drove her, she said that she felt led to help because she knew something bad was going to happen, and she saw her help as a small part of a much bigger effort. Later, in an interview with a UK radio station, she said that she probably got more credit than she deserved for the success of the vaccine. She said that her heart just told her to do what she thought she should do at the time. Even though the donation was made in a humble way, it became a small political issue when it came up again online. People in the media were arguing about how much credit should go to her charitable work and how much should go to the federal funds that the Trump administration put into the same study through Operation Warp Speed. Parton had nothing to do with that argument at all, and she stayed out of all the other ones involving the president too. She let the science speak for itself, while people on the internet argued about who earned more praise. Crazy People, Liars, and Washington's Best Show. It was easy for Parton to say just the right amount of things to reporters during the 2016 election without ever seriously taking a side. When some news outlets took what she said about Hillary Clinton to be an endorsement, she quickly clarified that she had not backed anyone. The Knoxville News Sentinel has been writing about her political maneuvers for a long time and has written about this explanation. When asked to comment on the race between Clinton and Trump, she said that the whole thing was the best thing to watch on TV and that both candidates were crazy. A line that let her recognize the chaos without supporting either person. It was very Parton. Funny enough to make the news, obscure enough to avoid a fight, and said with just the right amount of charm that almost no one argued with it. Even when her choices made people look at her neutrality in a very different way later in life, she still had that same instinct. In 2023, she released a duet with conservative musician Kid Rock on her album Rockstar. Fans didn't like it because they thought it went against her carefully crafted image. She told The Hollywood Reporter, and Rolling Stone later reported on this, that loving her didn't mean she couldn't work with someone else, and that she would rather accept people for who they are than judge them for their politics or mistakes. She linked her whole philosophy to her Christian religion and said that people should be forgiven instead of being judged forever. When the idea of Parton running for office came up, she said no right away. This is something that many people have thought about over the years. People magazine later reported that she joked to Metro in 2023 that the country already had enough breasts in the White House and that she was not fit for that job. She also said that she would rather make a difference through music than through politics. Still, reporters kept trying year after year because a direct political view from Parton, who is so well known and loved by everyone, would have made for a really interesting headline. She was able to stay where she wanted to be, loved by people who didn't agree with her on much else about the state of the country every time. She did this by coming up with a new joke, dodge, or gentle correction. That was the whole relationship between Dolly Parton and Donald Trump for almost 10 years. An offer was made but turned down. A question was asked and turned around. A joke was told instead of an opinion. And a quiet area of shared charity that neither side ever tried to hide. No one would have thought that the moment their names would finally be linked in a big way, in a headline, would happen in a Nashville hospital, not at an award show or on the campaign trail. When the flags were taken down for Dolly, NBC News reported that Parton died on the 25th of August, 2026, at the Vanderbilt Ingram Cancer Center in Nashville. Her spokeswoman, Marcelle Parisienne, said she had only been sick for a short time with cancer. Brian Seaver, her nephew and longtime head of security, confirmed the news in a video that she posted on social media. He said that the sadness was for the people who had lost her and not for Dolly herself. And tributes started coming in from all over the entertainment and politics worlds, almost right away. Trump's answer came quickly and was very different from how they had been publicly related for years while she was still alive, when they kept their distance. He wrote a dedication to her on Truth Social, calling her one of the best country singers of all time and saying that millions of people will miss her. For the full message, see Yahoo Entertainment. He wrote that there was no one else like her and that there never would be. He told her to rest in peace and that everyone loved her at the end of the message. The official act that went along with it made the moment stand out even more. As of that same evening at 6 o'clock, the White House ordered all flags at the White House, all government buildings, all military posts, all embassies, and all naval vessels to be lowered to half-staff. They will stay down until sunset on the 1st of September, 2026. Atlanta News First wrote about a week of national grief. Parton had spent years politely avoiding this level of formal national recognition while she was still alive. It only came about after she died. That action was also similar to something Trump did a lot during his second term. In September 2025, less than a year earlier, he had ordered flags to be lowered across the country to honor Charlie Kirk, a political activist rather than an official. This showed that Trump was becoming more open to giving this presidential power to cultural and political figures other than presidents, vice presidents, and members of Congress. Using the same discretion with Parton, a performer who had said her whole life she didn't want anything to do with politics, was a surprising turn that even people who have been following presidential morning speeches for a long time found interesting. The response wasn't just directed at the president. CBS News put together a list of tributes to her. Tennessee Senator Marsha Blackburn called her an iconic leader who loved her state and country, and Bill Hagerty, another Tennessee senator, called her unbelievably bright and an entrepreneurial powerhouse. Republican Rep. Diana Harshbarger, who lives in the Sevier County district where Parton grew up, said that she was always one of them, even when she became a big star. Reba McEntire, Dionne Warwick, and Casey Musgraves were among the musicians who paid tribute to Parton. Actress Julia Roberts, who had starred with Parton in Steel Magnolias, also spoke out, calling her a magical and joyful person. Trump wasn't the only politician who spoke out. And the fact that the mourning was nonpartisan made it clear how useful Parton's decades of studying neutrality had been. Former President Bill Clinton wrote his own tribute, saying that she rose high from her East Tennessee roots and never forgot where she came from. He praised her ongoing dedication to giving back, especially through her work to help people learn to read and write. Seeing a Republican president order flags to be lowered across the country, while a Democratic past president made his own moving speech on the same day, only added to Parton's argument that her music and kindness belonged to everyone, no matter what party they were in. It's important to remember that Parton spent her whole public life trying to avoid this kind of political attention. She turned down honors, avoided interview traps, and joked her way through every question about her political views. At the end of the day, it wasn't an award show or an endorsement that set Trump and Parton's names together for good in history. There was a flag lowered in her honor, a dedication written after she could no longer refuse it, and a moment of silence across the country to remember a woman who spent her whole career refusing to pick a side. This is the end of the video. Thanks for seeing. If you like this video, please like, comment, and subscribe to get more. Click on the video that comes up next to read more exciting stories.